Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm going to share a couple Valentines to be fond of. Get the pun? Here's the Hero Arts color layering fawn stamp, and I absolutely love their color layering stamps. They show right on the back some color suggestions and how they layer together, and there's such an easy way to get a cute focal image for your card just by stamping. So you don't have to do any hand coloring, so this is perfect for someone that doesn't necessarily love to color. Now, I've used this stamp before, but for those that have never used acrylic stamps before, if you have a brand new stamp set, when you open up your package, and I do this to the entire stamp, no matter which stamp in the package I am using, take a white eraser and erase the stamping surface. Often when stamps are made, there's a release agent put into the mold and it resists ink. So if you're having trouble stamping, this will likely solve that problem or at least improve that problem. Once you're done with that white eraser, just take a brush. I have a brush here that has some stiff bristles to it, and erase or brush off any of the eraser bits so that you don't get that interfering with your stamped image as well. And like I said, I do this to the entire stamp set, so I know myself if I've used one stamp in a set, I've done the whole thing. So this doesn't have to be done every single time. It just has to be done the first time you're going to use it. And you'll find that by doing this, your stamps will take your ink a little bit better and you'll get a little bit of a clearer image. Now, when it comes to clear stamps, sometimes you have to stamp it a couple times anyways, because sometimes it does look a little bit blotchy. And I find that you have to do this with clear stamps more than rubber stamps. But if you have a solid rubber stamp that you're having issues with, try this. It'll probably improve how you're stamping. So I'm actually going to do two cards here. I was going to do one with a traditional fawn, but then I saw the pink one on the back of the packaging and I thought that was so cute. And because there's a couple sentiments in this set that work perfectly for Valentine's, I thought, you know what, I'm going to do one pink, one traditional, and we're going to have a Valentine's themed card here, or two themed cards here. So the first one, the traditional colors that I'm using is brush corduroy, hickory smoke, and black. And for the pink one, I'm using Spun Sugar, Kitsch Flamingo, and picked raspberry. Now, I've had this stamp set for a while, and I had intended to pull it out again to do some winter cards. But this is just perfect for Valentine's with those two sentiments. One says dear to my heart, and I can't remember what the other one says off the top of my head. And this particular stamp set kind of reminded me of an incident we had here over the summer. We have deer in our yard regularly. They regularly bed down. They're regularly grazing in our yard. Not every single day, but often. And this summer, for the first time ever, we had a mama leave one of her babies, fresh little baby, right by our porch. And we got to watch it for the first day before she picked it back up again and went on her way. And we saw them often over the summer. It ended up being one of a twin. And we get deer so often, we know not to go near them or touch them, but it was just really cool to be part of or see part of that experience. We have often seen little babies in our yard, but it was really cool to really see it firsthand when it was that fresh. So every single layer of these stamps I am positioning properly, and I'm making sure to try put my head over top of the image to really get it positioned right. Now, if you want to test your stamped image before actually stamping on your cardstock, you can take a piece of acetate and put that over the image and then stamp it just to make sure you have everything lined up right. And then I'm also cleaning off the stamp each time I'm done with it before moving to the next color, as well as before putting it in my package. Sometimes I'm stamping it twice, sometimes I don't necessarily need to. It just depends on how dark it is stamping. And then sometimes for the pink one, I did take the gray with the second layer because it just looked a little bit pink and the gray just toned it down a touch. But once again, this is an adorable image, both for winter cards, and I think this is perfect for this Valentine's card here. So you'll see when I'm cleaning them off, I'm using just a baby wipe. Even a wet cloth would work. These are distress inks, so they are water soluble. You don't need anything super technical to clean them off. And I just want to get the excess ink off of there. You could use any inks for these layered stamps. You could even use oxide inks. I like the distress inks because of their transparency with this. but they're a great way to layer to create focal images. And there's tons of these color layering stamps out there. They're just a great alternative. If you don't necessarily love coloring, but love stamped images, they're perfect. So we have our deer done, and I'm going to do them in an oval. So I have the Hero Arts Infinity Ovals die set here. I'm going to use a smaller one for the deer piece, and then I'm going to use a little bit larger one of the next size up, and I'm going to create a mat around it. And each one of these cards is going to have a different colored mat. And then I'm also going to use a mat for around my rectangle layer. So here are the two deer images. Absolutely adorable, and I love how almost lifelike the realistically colored one is, but that pink one is so adorable as well. So I have some distress watercolor here. No, actually it's distress white Heavystock. I couldn't find distress watercolor at my local store today, so I just have white Heavystock, and this sometimes it can handle the moisture and sometimes it can't, and it didn't do too bad in this instance. So I'm doing the same colors of pink that I used for that deer, and I'm just coloring this cardstock to create some trees that coordinate with it. When it comes to the one for the natural colored one, I'll use some greens, but greens didn't really suit the pink one. So what I'm doing here, I'm just doing kind of a traditional distress background here, but what I have, when I smushed those ink pads, I did the lighter towards the top, the darker towards the bottom, because I wanted my trees to be lighter towards the top, darker towards the bottom. And then I have a heated tool here, and I'm just using that to dry in between each time I tap in there. When I tap in there, I'm just trying to get some ink dots and blobs and layer the ink together. And then I'm using the heated tool to dry it. Now, it doesn't need to be 100% dry. 80 to 90% dry is good, but you don't want it wet. If you have it wet, it's just going to end up creating one big puddle on top of your cardstock. But if it's mostly dry, those layers will layer together or layer on top of each other, and you're just going to get a really cool and more interesting background. Now, I have this heated tool here. A hairdryer probably would work. You could even just let it air dry on its own. This just speeds up the process, but it makes a much more interesting piece rather than solid cardstock. So for the next set of trees for my naturally colored deer, I'm using bundled sage, peeled paint, and forest moss. They're my favorite ones to go to for trees, and I'm repeating that exact same process. Lighter colors towards the top, darker colors towards the bottom, and then I mist with the distress sprayer just to get a little bit of water droplets in there. Use my heated tool to dry between layers. Typically when I'm doing backgrounds like this, it's usually about 3 or 4 dips to create the finished piece. You could do more or less. It's just basically until you like it. There's not really a set number. Once you like your background or your die cut, you're done. You can do more or less. And even if you did all of the ink, there's no ink left on your sheet there, you could do some. You could add more ink. You could smush your ink pads again and then just spray them with water and then start the whole process once again just to create some more layers. Now I have the silicone mat for my glass mat here that I'm using. You could also use the media surface mat. I had to replace mine and I was just waiting for it to still come in when I was doing this. So I just have the small mat that comes with this glass mat, and it's the perfect surface for doing this. The ink reacts differently on the surface mat or the little mat here than it does on the glass mat. So I like to use that when I'm doing these distressed backgrounds because you're going to get a different result. So now that those die cuts are completely done and dried, I have my layers for my card ready, and I decided I wanted to add a little bit of speckles. So I have a distressed mica spray. It's one of the seasonal ones. This one is the Frozen Fog from the Christmas #5 set. I will have it listed down below if you need to know exactly which set it is. But it's just a nice neutral gray, and I thought it would look nice as splatters on my background mat as well as on the trees. I didn't want to put any splatters on the deer piece because I didn't want a chance going on top of the deer and having the mica spray interfere with my distress inks. Because they're both water-based, they would interfere. Once I let it completely dry, I used some Barely Art glue and glued my layers together. A little bit harder to see the black layer on my black glass mat here, but it got done. And then I'm going to use the same glue and glue my oval layers. Now I wanted to glue these layers on it before I put my trees on. I want my trees to go a little bit in front of the oval for the deer. And I also wanted to do this before it was glued to my card base, because I'm going to glue half of the trees on and then use the scissors to trim it off. And I wanted to not have as many layers to have to deal with. Originally, I thought I was going to glue it on and then cut it off once the glue was dry, but I just placed the piece down and then trimmed it before it was glued so that I could take the edge of that tree and line it up with the inside of my white mat there. Easy enough to do. I just basically cut between the trees, but I wanted to make sure that I had a nice straight edge for that, and I didn't want to necessarily freehand it without the guide of the side of that mat there. I think these trees are perfect for framing in that little fawn, and so easy to glue together. With this glue, when in a fine tip bottle, it's very easy to get the glue exactly where it needs to be on that die cut. And then when I glue them together, I like to put an acrylic block on top just to hold everything in place. It's just a nice flat surface, frees up my hands. I don't have to sit there holding something while it is drying. It's always nice to have free hands to continue to do other things that are a little bit more interesting than holding something down while it is drying. Now I chose to use die cuts for this card, but you could also use masking sheets and mask off that fawn and then stamp trees around it. I think that would have looked good as well. And I really debated between the two, but I like the texture of the extra die cuts on top, as well as the texture of the distressed background on these trees. I just thought it kind of made it look a little bit more interesting. Originally, I was going to put my sentiments on the front of the cards, but because I have the ovals and the die cut, there was just no space that it went naturally. So the piece that I had stamped the sentiments on, I tucked that to the side and decided to put those sentiments on the inside of my card. I didn't even show you guys the stamping of the sentiments because I knew I wasn't going to use them by the time I was editing this video. But it's the same process as what I'm doing here, stamping on the inside of the card. Now, I don't necessarily love directly stamping on the inside of a card simply because there's a better chance of messing it up. And so I have a white piece of cardstock here cut a little bit smaller, and I'm going to mat it with pink, same as the layer on the front. It's just going to tie it in a little bit better, and that way, if by chance I happen to mess up my stamping, I can easily pull it in or pull it out or swap it out for a new piece of cardstock. Now I did originally stamp the sentiments in a few different colors, and it did come in handy to be able to put that stamped sentiment kind of close to the front of the card to be able to choose exactly what color I wanted to stamp those sentiments in. So it's a great way to just kind of see what you like, what looks best. I ended up doing pink for the pink one, and then I just stamped in black for the natural colored one. And I do stamp it a couple times to get a solid image as well as the crisp image. And Fond of You is the second one. I couldn't remember what the second sentiment was said. But again, both of these work perfectly for Valentine's cards. You could use them other times of the year too, but because of the time that we're in when I'm creating this, I thought it was perfect. So here's the inside of the card. I have the same black mat that I have on the natural one on the front. And then I have the same colored pink mat that I'm going to use for the pink card. The mat sizes are exactly the same as well. I cut my larger colored mat at 5 3/8 by 4 1/8, and then the white mat is 5 1/4 by 4 inches. I lately have really liked having just a thin, narrow mat on there. You could do your mats whatever you like, however you like. You can even use the Matting Basics die set that Spellbinders has if you want just to die cut some mats. I love the die cut edge that they create. The thing I love about card making is it's whatever you feel like at the time. The only thing consistent about it is we change our minds, change our moods, and we are not necessarily always the most consistent. So it's great to be able to just customize it to how you're feeling at the moment. So once I have those mats glued together, I'm putting them in the front of the cards, closing the card and then putting that acrylic block on it again just for a few minutes while that glue holds. Here is the end result. I absolutely love how adorable these look, and they're a little bit non-traditional for Valentine's because of the deer theme, but those sentiments are perfect for Valentine's as well. And this pink one I think is just the most adorable. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you have a fantastic day.